Hello and welcome to New Europe Studios, where you can watch us make the news. With us today is Jamar, the head of the European Commission Representation Office in Belgium. Welcome, Jimmy.
Hello, Alex.
You have very recently, only today actually, published a book, Pourquoi Aimer L'Europe Maintenant. So how exactly does that translate in English, the title?
Why should we like Europe today? Something like that. It's difficult to translate.
Yeah. Why did you choose to write a book like that right now?
Well, it's actually a collection of a series of blogs that I've been holding every week. So I've been posting every week on the site of my office, the representation of the Commission in Belgium, a short piece on how I see the evolution of Europe, but particularly I would say this one thing that strikes me today is the fact that people are no longer attracted by the European project. So the sort of fading away of the European project in people's minds, I think, is something that's very worrying. So the title of the book has two important things. Why? Like the word, why should we love or like Europe today? And then the word today. So three important elements there.
Okay, and did you think? I mean, you've been working with the institutions for years now. Did you think that you'd ever need to write a book? Because the title in itself is very pessimistic.
It's not pessimistic. The book is not pessimistic. In fact, I'm rather optimistic if people are able to, I would say, to get their act together, and if the various actors that are dealing in Europe today, and I mean by that not only, I would say, in the institutions, but I would say also in the member states, if the governments would stop, I would say, this Euro bashing, that they, it's Brussels' fault, But this gets into people's minds, of course, in times of crisis. And then also there's a role, I see a specific role for civil society in this, so that everybody can take, I would say, their responsibility in trying to counter this this negative trend, this negative feeling that I'm.
You talk about Euro bashing and what civil society can do. Can you walk us through a few of the main themes of the book?
Well, what I think is I see a shift. The crisis certainly emphasized this shift within the population. For a long time, let's say for the 51st years, you had amongst the population about, I would say, 20% of, I would say, the Euro supporters, usually people from the elite. Then you had about 70%, 65-70% of people that were indifferent towards the project. But some were, I would say, they had this idea that, okay, they didn't understand how this thing was working, but at least it was positive for them. And then you had always 10 to 15% of people that were resolutely against. Now, with this crisis, I think one thing changed in people's perceptions, in people's minds, and that is the fact that people don't feel protected by this project anymore. If you don't feel protected, and if you don't find the ways to counteract this, then people are going to move against. So I see a shift. First of all, I see a radicalization in people's attitudes towards Europe, and I see a shift from the indifference towards people that are opposed. And I think this I would say, obliges us to do two things. First of all, to revisit, to reposition the European project, to see, and you have to include the citizens in this in one way or another, what are we going to do with this project? And the second thing is, how do we communicate it? Because you don't communicate in the same way to people that are indifferent and mildly positive with people that are against. And the rising populism that I see in Europe, populism to the left, populism to the right, but that have, I would say, one common quote-unquote enemy, which is Europe. I think this is something we need to deal with.
In politics, of course, any political party always needs a target in order to attract voters. But you talk of the European project, and we always talk of the European project in Brussels. And in fact, it's probably very difficult for people in the member states, whether in villages, towns, or cities, to understand how we can talk about a project when it's something that affects their daily lives on such a huge level. So how do you think we can better communicate to them? Because even this word project,
the word project, I mean, first one element on this word project, I think we should not forget that this is a project. and it can go any way. I mean, for one reason or another, I mean, in fact, and this was the positive side of things, that in the first 55 years of since this project was launched, it was always able to to follow a sort of linear road, where you had a crisis, but every crisis was an occasion to put something new on the table. It was we were able to attract more countries and to have more shared competences. This is something that's not finalized, and it can go in any direction. And when I listen to some of the issues that are in the air, or some of the initiatives of some of the member states that want to repatriate or renationalize some of the competences that were given to the European Union and to the Commission in particular, then I think this raises an issue, and that's why we have to reconsider this project, see where we want to go altogether. The other thing that you said is, and we should never forget either, why is this important? Why should we talk about Europe today? And why is this issue of liking Europe somewhere in the air? It's because it's the only project in the whole world, and in the history of humanity, this type of project, that actually influences every day the daily lives of people. One of the Belgian newspapers is going to undertake, before the European election, a sort of exercise, calling it a one day with Europe. And they're going to follow, imagine the life of a citizen, a person, from the moment this person wakes up, goes and have a shower, brushes his teeth or her teeth, and then follow during the day, and see how actually this European project influences, I would say, every step of the daily lives. Now, from what I understand, people deep in themselves are not necessarily against the European project, but they need to understand it, and they need to know how this project relates to their daily lives. And that's something why I say we have to communicate differently, because as President Barroso said himself in his last speech, the two last years, on the speech on the State of the Union, nobody takes this project for granted anymore. So if you want to keep the people on board, or if you want to bring back people now that have left, you have to be convincing, and you have to find ways to communicate.
One of the criticisms launched at the EU institutions is that they're not only unable to make the Union relevant to the citizens, but they're certainly not capable of making the European project a European dream for the citizens. How can we move towards that, you think?
I will dare I dared in this book, in fact, a small comparison with the United States, but the situations, of course, being very different. Actually, when the States got started as a project, it was also a project in the beginning, but they started first by a constitution, and they created the, I would say, the instruments to build this American dream. And they have it very clearly, right into the Constitution. The hymn, the flag, the religion had an important role, the values. I mean, these things are embedded into the Constitution or the texts that are around it. The process of creating and maintaining the American dream was not a linear process either, in the sense that you had, don't forget, a very devastating and painful civil war. But the fact is that you have the instruments to keep up the dream, and the dream is there. I think that what happened with the European project is, after the war, nobody was really contesting, I would say, because of the situation. Nobody was against this project, on the contrary. So what was new, or what was, they created it on the other side, I would say, the creation of the American dream, taking it in a way for granted that this project was supported by the people. So thinking that there was the European dream, and in fact, in the beginning, this was the case. Now you see that if you have a dream, you have to entertain the dream. You have to, and you have to relate to the dream. And this is something I would say that we did not pay sufficient amount of attention to. We pay the consequences now. So I'm not pessimistic in the sense. I think there are lots of things that we can do to recapture this, but we have to communicate in this respect in a different way.
You mentioned the American Constitution, of course, which was one of the first steps to achieving this American dream. The European Constitution, which was then changed into the Reform Treaty, which was then changed into the Lisbon Treaty, and watering down in each step. and this at a time where the EU was quite popular compared to at least now. So even in this current state, which is not the best it's been in the last 50 years, what are the next steps we can take?
Well, I think after the European elections, depending also on the results, you will see if different types of political initiatives. I think you will certainly have a move by certain member states, probably, taking the lead on trying to repatriate or renationalize a number of. This was already announced. So I wouldn't be surprised if this attempt was made again. On the other hand, I think given the situation we are in, there will also, and I hope there will be, a sort of political project that will be on board, taken probably, I would say, coming the German Chancellor that has to take probably the lead on this, but other countries can, will, I'm sure, join in. So you might very well have a situation where you will have different options after the election. Why do I mention it's maybe the times are ripe for taking a real political initiative? Well, on the one hand, you had what happened in Switzerland a few weeks ago, which triggered, I would say, some type of reaction on the side of Angela Merkel. For one reason is that I think everybody realized that a party that represents between 20 and 25% of the vote in normal circumstances, if given the possibility to take their project on the national level, are able to collect 50% of the vote and 50% of the constituencies in Switzerland. I think this was a strong signal. But the second thing is, of course, also you have the new situation, which is the situation on the eastern borders, and maybe this will also trigger, and it's a bit ironic because it goes back to the first steps of the European integration. But this might trigger also the need and the necessity to take a step forward. But if we go towards a political union, I think that we will not succeed in building this concretely if you don't bring the people on board, if people don't feel part of it. So this is what I claim in the book, that we have to balance the steps that were undertaken, and there were real steps in consolidating Europe. People should not forget this. During the crisis, banking union, on the monetary side, on the financial side, on the budgetary side, but this has to be now counterbalanced. And from everything I judge, because my role is to be in contact with the people, people want also to have, I would say, a second pillar, which is a citizen pillar. If you can put the two pillars together, then I think we would be ripe for a political leap.
So the citizens are going to pick up your book, read it on the eve of the European elections. What's the main message they can take away from it?
Well, it's a message of hope, and it's a message of mobilization. I think everybody has to take their share. I think civil society and the citizens themselves. I was happy, for instance, to see that the first citizen initiative, this is also a positive symbol, was passed, Parliament a few weeks ago. This is an interesting sign. Of course, it's a difficult process, but I think everybody at their own level can take. You see, for the moment, triggered by scientific community, the cultural community, you see a lot of projects in the sense of a new narrative for Europe and this kind of thing. I'm happy about this. I'm happy that civil society is also taking their responsibility, and they should do this more. We have to maybe organize this a bit better, having them, because there are, I would say, initiatives taken a bit all over the place. We should bring them together, and we should look into this. So citizens now can take also their share of responsibilities, and I think this is I would say everybody can get mobilized in this respect.
And is that go and vote? Is that the first priority?
Well, the first thing is go and vote, of course. The first thing is go and vote. I smile because it's interesting, because in Belgium, or in my country, people are obliged to go and vote. And you have another very interesting thing in Belgium, which is a fascinating country in many ways, is that we have on the same day all of our major elections except for the local elections. So parliamentary elections, the regional elections, European elections. I think it's a very healthy process, because this in a way, Europeanizes the national political life, and it nationalizes a bit the debate on Europe, which is what makes Europe specific for Belgium and the regions. So I'm very happy about this coincidence because it really dampens or diminishes the risks of protest votes and this kind of thing, which unfortunately you're going to see in a series of other countries.
Jimmy, can we expect your book in different languages?
Well, this is up to my editor to see. So I think if this the blogs exist in Dutch, some of them actually exist in English because they're published by my little column in New Europe. If there's an interest, of course, I think we will be able to manage to get this book also in English.
Jimmy Jamar's Why
Pourquoi
Like Europe
Aimer l'Europe Maintenant?
Now.
Why should we like Europe today?
The book is out now. You can get it in bookstores, and I hope you'll read it. It's a great read. Thank you very much, Jimmy, for being with us today.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure.